Yeah. Hello, welcome to Heavy Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading the Bible. We are not going to be doing the joke of the day. We are going to be doing the synopsis, and then we are going to be reading 20 Leagues Under the Sea. My name is Jonathan, and my dad will go with you from now on in 5, 4, 3, 2, merge. I'm just kidding.
Can't find my water. So, sorry about that, looking. And it is more than 20 leagues under the sea. It is 20,000 leagues under the sea. So they've already driven quite a ways on their quest. Kim, are you going to send the links? And I am going to go ahead right now and start. We're going to read Genesis 31 and 32. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible. And as usual, there's your link. I can't hear you, Kim. Okay, and where did it go? There it is. All right, Genesis 31, English Standard Version of the Bible. Sorry, I do have allergies today, and I can't find my Allegra. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me in the favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock were spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream I went too far down, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob, which is pretty good advice, whatever God has said to you to do, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days, and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tents in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me, and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and song, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Excuse me. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your fathers spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have done that is yours, and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. For my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was, by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night." Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Therefore he named it Gilead and Mizpah, for he said, "The Lord watch between you and me, when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." Then Laban said to Jacob, "See, this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me, this heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. Genesis chapter 22, if it's going to load. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him, and the flocks and the herds and the camels into 2 camps, thinking, "If Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape." And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good.' I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau: 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove." He instructed the first, "When Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, 'To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you?' Then you shall say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover, he is behind us." He likewise instructed the second and the third, and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And actually it's 12 children because he had a daughter, so it's his 11 sons. But I'm sure that's what the author is meaning here, what Moses means when he says 11. I'm rambling, sorry. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. And tomorrow we will read Genesis chapter 20 or 33, in which Jacob meets Esau. And I think that we're still missing Rebecca. Howdy to Cindy Stockton. Thank you, Granny Bear, for joining us tonight. I trust that you're still there, or either that or this number one is Jenny. I'm not sure. But at this time, we will have our... Did we say we are having the joke or not the joke? No joke. Okay, so we're going to have the synopsis. So here's Kimberly. Tell us all about what happened yesterday.
What happened yesterday was, so they swam for a few hours, and then eventually during the night till morning.
Okay.
And then they found another survivor, I guess.
Who's the other survivor?
The harpooner.
And how did he survive?
He fell on the giant narwhal that's actually a submarine. And so they went in, they got into the submarine, and they encountered these people who didn't speak any language that they knew. They spoke French, English, and German to them to see if they could understand any of those languages, and they couldn't, or so they thought. And then they went to bed, and when they woke up, they did for dinner, but for breakfast, no. And I think at least, like, they slept all day. So they were very hungry. Hi, Granny Bear. Hi, Mom. So then what happened was, when somebody did finally come in, the harpooner, I keep forgetting his name, sorry, Ned, he gave him a chokehold because he was like very mad because they weren't giving him food.
And the harpooner is from Austria, right?
No.
Italy?
No.
United States?
No.
Mexico?
No.
Denmark?
No.
Norway?
I don't think so.
Where's the harpooner from?
I forget.
Oh, Canada. Okay.
I just know that it wasn't any of those.
All right. The harpooner's Canadian.
And then this other guy said in
Perfect French.
Yeah, French.
Because you have to remember that this book was written in French.
He said in French, their names, and he asked if they could talk.
Okay.
They told them their story.
Kimmy, can you text Rebecca and see if she intends to join us? And okay, what is going on now? Okay, so here we are, chapter 10, the man of the seas. The first word is it. And my document's trying to connect to something. Okay, stop. All right, here we go. The man of the seas. The first word is it. It was the commander of the vessel who thus spoke. Remember, he said, "Be quiet, Master Land, and you, Professor, and will you be so good as to listen to me?" And I am sorry, my allergies are just driving me nuts, so just please bear with me tonight. Hopefully I can get it under control tomorrow. It was the commander of the vessel who thus spoke. At these words, Ned Land rose suddenly. The steward, nearly strangled, tottered out on a sign from his master, but such was the power of the commander on board that not a gesture betrayed the resentment which this man must have felt toward the Canadian. Consul, interested in spite of himself, I, stupefied, awaited in silence the result of this scene. The commander, leaning against the corner of a table with his arms folded, scanned us with profound attention. Did he hesitate to speak? Did he regret the words which he had just spoken in French? One might almost think so. After some moments of silence, which not one of us dreamed of breaking, "Gentlemen," said he, in a calm and penetrating voice, "I speak French, English, German, and Latin equally well. I could therefore have answered you at our first interview, but I wish to know you first, then to reflect. The story told by each one, entirely agreeing in the main points, convinced me of your identity. I know now that chance has brought before me Monsieur Pierre Aronnax, professor of natural history at the Museum of the Musée de Paris, entrusted with a scientific mission abroad, consul, his servant, and Ned Land of Canadian origin, harpooner on board the frigate Abraham Lincoln of the Navy of the United States of America." I bowed assent. It was not a question that the commander put to me, therefore there was no answer to be made. This man expressed himself with perfect ease, without any accent. His sentences were well turned, his words clear, and his fluency of speech remarkable. Yet I did not recognize in him a fellow countryman. He continued the conversation in these terms: "You have doubtless thought, sir, that I have delayed long in paying you this second visit. The reason is that your identity recognized, I wish to weigh maturely what part to act towards you. I have hesitated much. Most annoying circumstances have brought you into the presence of a man who has broken all the ties of humanity. You have come to trouble my existence. Unintentionally," said I. "Unintentionally," replied the stranger, raising his voice a little. "Was it unintentionally that the Abraham Lincoln pursued me all over the seas? Was it unintentionally that you took passage in this frigate? Was it unintentionally that your cannonballs rebounded off the plating of my vessel? Was it unintentionally that Mr. Ned Land struck me with his harpoon?" I detected a restrained irritation in these words. But to these recriminations I had a very natural answer to make, and I made it. "Sir," said I, "no doubt you are ignorant of the discussions which have taken place concerning you in America and Europe. You do not know that divers accidents caused by collisions with your submarine machine have excited public feelings in the two continents. I omit the theories without number by which it was sought to explain that of which you alone possess the secret. But you must understand that in pursuing you over the high seas of the Pacific, the Abraham Lincoln believed itself to be chasing some powerful sea monster of which it was necessary to be rid the ocean at any price." A half smile curled the lips of the commander. Then, in a calmer voice, "Monsieur Aronnax," he replied, "dare you affirm that your frigate would not as soon have pursued and cannonaded a submarine boat as a monster?" This question embarrassed me, for certainly Captain Farragut might not have hesitated. He might have thought it his duty to destroy a contrivance of this kind, as he would a gigantic narwhal. "You understand then, sir," continued the stranger, "that I have the right to entreat you as enemies." I answered nothing purposefully. For what good would it do to discuss such a proposition, when force could destroy the best arguments? "I have hesitated some time," continued the commander. "Nothing obliged me to show you hospitality. If I chose to separate myself from you, I should have no interest in seeing you again. I could place you upon the deck of this vessel which has served you as a refuge. I could sink beneath the waters and forget that you had ever existed. Would not that be my right? It might be the right of a savage, I answered, but not that of a civilized man. Professor, replied the commander quickly, I am not what you call a civilized man. I have done with society entirely, for reasons which I alone have the right of appreciating. I do not therefore obey its laws, and I desire you never to allude to them before me again. This was said plainly. A flash of anger and disdain kindled in the eyes of the unknown, and I had a glimpse of a terrible past in the life of this man. Not only had he put himself beyond the pale of human laws, but he had made himself independent of them, free in the strictest acceptation of the word, quite beyond their reach. Who then would dare to pursue him at the bottom of the sea when, on its surface, he defied all attempts made against him? What vessel could resist the shock of his submarine monitor? What cuirass, however thick, could withstand the blows of his spur? No man could demand from him an account of his actions. God, if he believed in one, his conscience, if he had one, were the sole judges to him to whom he was answerable. These reflections crossed my mind rapidly, whilst the stranger personage was silent, absorbed, and as if wrapped up in himself. I regarded him with fear mingled with interest, as doubtless Oedipus regarded the Sphinx. And rather a long silence After a rather long silence, the commander resumed the conversation. I have hesitated, said he, but I have thought that my interest might be reconciled with that pity to which every human being has a right. You will remain on board my vessel since fate has cast you there. You will be free, and in exchange for this liberty, I shall only impose one single condition. Your word of honor to submit to it will suffice. Speak, sir, I answered. I suppose this condition is one which a man of honor may accept? Yes, sir, it is this. It is possible that certain events unforeseen may oblige me to consign you to your cabins for some hours or some days, as the case may be. As I desire never to use violence, I expect from you more than all the others a passive obedience. In thus acting, I take all the responsibility. I acquit you entirely, for I make it an impossibility for you to see what ought not to be seen. Do you accept this condition? Then things took place on board which, to say the least, were singular, and which ought not to have been seen by people who were not placed beyond the pale of social laws. Amongst the surprises which the future was preparing for me, this might not be the least. We accept, I answered. Only I will ask your permission, sir, to address one question to you, one only. Speak, sir. You said that we should be free on board entirely. I ask you then, what do you mean by this liberty? Just the liberty to go, to come, to see, to observe, even all that passes here, save under rare circumstances, the liberty, in short, which we enjoy ourselves, my companions and I. It was evident that we did not understand one another. Pardon me, sir, I resumed, but this liberty is only what every prisoner has of pacing his prison. It cannot suffice us. It must suffice you, however. What? We must renounce forever seeing our country, our friends, our relations again? Yes, sir, but to renounce that unendurable world yoke which men believe to be liberty is not perhaps as painful as you think. Well, exclaimed Ned Land, never will I give my word of honor not to try to escape. I did not ask you for your word of honor, Master Land, answered the commander coldly. Sir, I replied, beginning to get angry in spite of myself, you abuse your situation toward us. It is cruelty. No, sir, it is clemency. You are my prisoners of war. I keep you when I could, but a word plunge you into the depths of the ocean. by a word, plunge you into the depths of the ocean. You attacked me. You came to surprise a secret which no man in the world must penetrate, the secret of my whole existence. And you think that I am going to send you back to that world which must know me no more? Never. In retaining you, it is not you whom I guard, it is myself. These words indicated a resolution taken on the part of the commander against which no arguments would prevail. So, sir, I rejoined, you give us simply the choice between life and death. Simply. My friends, said I, to a question thus put, there is nothing to answer, but no word of honor binds us to the master of this vessel. None, sir, answered the unknown. Then, in a gentler voice, he continued, now, permit me to finish what I have to say to you. I know you, Monsieur Aronnax, you and your companions will not perhaps have so much to complain of in the chance which has bound you to my fate. You will find amongst the books which are my favorite study the work which you have published on the depths of the sea. I have often read it. You have carried out your work as far as terrestrial science permitted you, but you do not know all. You have not seen all. Let me tell you then, Professor, that you will not regret the time passed on board my vessel. You are going to visit the land of marvels. These words of the commander had a great effect upon me. I cannot deny it. My weak point was touched, and I forgot for a moment that the contemplation of these sublime subjects was not worth the loss of liberty. Besides, I trusted to the future to decide this grave question. So I contented myself with saying, by what name ought I to address you? Sir, replied the commander, I am nothing to you but Captain Nemo, and you and your companions are nothing to me but the passengers of the Nautilus. Captain Nemo called. A steward appeared. The captain gave him his orders in that strange language which I did not understand. Then, turning toward the Canadian and consul, a repast awaits you in your cabin, said he. Be so good as to follow this man. And now, Monsieur Aronnax, our breakfast is ready. Permit me to lead the way. I am at your service, Captain. I followed Captain Nemo, and as soon as I had passed through the door, I found myself in a kind of passage lighted by electricity, similar to the waist of a ship. After we had proceeded a dozen yards, a second door opened before me. I then entered a dining room decorated and furnished in severe taste. High oaken sideboards inlaid with ebony stood at the two extremities of the room, and upon their shelves glittered china, porcelain, and glass of inestimable value. The plate on the table sparkled in the rays which the luminous ceiling shed around, while the light was tempered and softened by exquisite paintings. In the center of the room was a table richly laid out. Captain Nemo indicated the place I was to occupy. The breakfast consisted of a certain number of dishes, the contents of which were furnished by the sea alone, and I was ignorant of the nature and mode of preparation of some of them. I acknowledged that they were good, but they had a peculiar flavor which I easily became accustomed to. These different aliments appeared to me to be rich in phosphorus, and I thought they must have a marine origin. Captain Nemo looked at me. I asked him no questions, but he guessed my thoughts and answered of his own accord the questions which I was burning to address him. The greater part of these dishes are unknown to you, he said to me. However, you may partake them without fear. They are wholesome and nourishing. For a long time I have renounced the food of the earth, and I am never ill now. My crew, who are healthy, are fed on the same food. So, said I, all these edibles are the produce of the sea. Yes, Professor. The sea supplies all my wants. Sometimes I cast my nets in tow and I draw them in ready to break. Sometimes I hunt in the midst of this element, which appears to be inaccessible to man, and quarry the game which dwells in my submarine forests. My flocks, like those of Neptune's old shepherds, graze fearlessly in the immense prairies of the ocean. I have a vast property there, which I cultivate myself, and which is always sown by the hand of the Creator of all things. I can understand perfectly, sir, that your nets furnish excellent fish for your table. I can understand also that you hunt aquatic game in your submarine forests, but I cannot understand at all how a particle of meat, no matter how small, can figure in your bill of fare. This which you believe to be meat, Professor, is nothing else than fillet of turtle. Here are also some dolphin's livers, which you take to be ragout of pork. My cook is a clever fellow who excels in dressing these various products of the ocean. Taste all these dishes. Here is a preserve of sea cucumber, which a Malay would declare to be unrivaled in the world. Here is a cream of which the milk has been furnished by the cetacea, and the sugar by the great fucus of the North Sea. And lastly, permit me to offer you some preserve of anemones, which is equal to that of the most delicious fruits. I tasted more from curiosity than as a connoisseur, whilst Captain Nemo enchanted me with his extraordinary stories. You like the sea, Captain? Yes, I love it. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is only the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinite, as one of your poets has said. In fact, Professor Nature manifests herself in it by her three kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal. The sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with the sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it. In it is supreme tranquility. The sea dog does not belong to despots. Upon its surface, men can still exercise unjust laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But at 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases, their influence is quenched, and their power disappears. Ah, sir, live in the bosom of the waters. There only is independence. There I recognize no masters. There I am free. Captain Nemo suddenly became silent in the midst of his enthusiasm, by which he was quite carried away. For a few moments he paced up and down, much agitated. Then he became more calm, regained his accustomed coldness of expression, and turning towards me, "Now, Professor," said he, "if you wish to go over the Nautilus, I am at your service." Captain Nemo rose. I followed him. A double door, contrived at the back of the dining room, opened, and I entered a room equal in dimensions to that which I had just quitted. It was a library. High pieces of furniture of black violet ebony inlaid with brass supported upon their wide shelves a great number of books uniformly bound. They followed the shape of the room, terminating at the lower part in huge divans, covered with brown leather, which were curved to afford the greatest comfort. Light, movable desks made to slide in and out at will allowed one to rest one's book while reading. In the center stood an immense table covered with pamphlets, amongst which were some newspapers already of old date. The electric light flooded everything. It was shed from 4 unpolished globes, half sunk in the volutes of the ceiling. I looked with real admiration at this room, so ingeniously fitted up, and I could scarcely believe my eyes. "Captain Nemo," I said to my host, who had just thrown himself on one of the divans, "this is a library which would do honor to more than one of the continental palaces, and I am absolutely astounded when I consider that it can follow you to the bottom of the seas." Where could one find greater solitude or silence, Professor? Replied Captain Nemo. Did your study in the museum afford you such perfect quiet? No, sir, and I must confess that it is a very poor one after yours. You must have 6 or 7 thousand volumes here. 12,000, Monsieur Aronnax. These are only the only ties which bind me to the earth. But I had done with the world on the day when my Nautilus plunged for the first time beneath the waters. That day I bought my last volumes, my last pamphlets, my last papers, and from that time I wish to think that men no longer think or write. These books, Professor, are at your service besides, and you can make use of them freely. I thanked Captain Nemo and went up to the shelves of the library. Works on science, morals, and literature abounded in every language, but I did not see one single work on political economy. That subject appeared to be strictly proscribed. Strange to say, all these books were irregularly arranged in whatever language they were written, and this medley proved that the captain of the Nautilus must have read indiscriminately the books which he took up by chance. Sir, said I to the captain, I thank you for having placed this library at my disposal. It contains treasures of science, and I shall profit by them. This room is not only a library, said Captain Nemo, it is also a smoking room. A smoking room, I cried. Then one may smoke on board? Certainly. Then, sir, I am forced to believe that you have kept up a communication with Havana. Not any, answered the captain, except this cigar, Monsieur Aronnax, and though it does not come from Havana, you will be pleased with it if you are a connoisseur. I took the cigar which was offered me. Its shape recalled the London ones, but it seemed to be made of leaves of gold. I lighted it at the little brazier which was supported upon an elegant bronze stem, and drew the first whiffs with the delight of a lover of smoking who has not smoked for 2 days. It is excellent, but it is not tobacco. No, answered the captain, this tobacco comes neither from Havana nor from the East. It is a kind of seaweed, rich in nicotine, but which the sea provides me, but somewhat sparingly. At that moment, Captain Nemo opened a door which stood opposite to that by which I had entered the library, and I passed into an immense drawing room splendidly lighted. It was a vast four-sided room, 30 feet long, 18 wide, and 15 high, a luminous ceiling decorated with light arabesques, however you say. It is a French word that's also in English, but I don't know how to say it in English. Shed a soft, clear light over all the marvels accumulated in this museum. For it was, in fact, a museum in which an intelligent and prodigal hand had gathered all the treasures of nature and art with the artistic confusion which distinguishes a painter's studio. 30 first-rate pictures, uniformly framed, separated by bright drapery, ornamented the walls, which were hung with tapestry of severe design. I saw works of great value, the greater part of which I had admired in the special collections of Europe and in the exhibitions of paintings. The several schools of the old masters were represented by a Madonna of Raphael, a Virgin of Leonardo da Vinci, a nymph of Correggio, a woman of Titan, an Adoration of Veronese, an Assumption of Murillo, a portrait of Holbein, a monk of Velasquez, a martyr of Ribera, a fair of Rubens, 2 Flemish landscapes of Teniers, 3 little genre pictures of Gerard Dow, Metzu, and Paul Potter, 2 specimens of Géricault and Proudhon, and some sea pieces of Bakhuyzen and Vernet. Amongst the works of modern painters were pictures with the signatures of Delacroix, Ingres, Decamps, Troyan, Meissonier, Daubigny, etc., and some admirable statues in marble and bronze after the finest antique models stood upon pedestals in the corners of this magnificent museum. Amazement, as the captain of the Nautilus had predicted, had already begun to take possession of me. "Professor," said this strange man, "you must excuse the unceremonious way in which I received you and the disorder of this room." "Sir," I answered, "without seeking to know who you are, I recognize in you an artist." "An amateur, nothing more, sir. Formerly I loved to collect these beautiful works created by the hand of men. I sought them greedily and ferreted them out indefatigably, and without getting tired of doing it. And I have been able to bring together some objects of great value. These are my last souvenirs of the world which is dead to me. In my eyes, your modern artists are already old. They have 2 or 3 thousand years of existence. I confound them in my own mind. Masters have no age. And these musicians, said I, pointing out some works of Weber, Rossini, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Meyerbeer, Harold Wagner, Aubert, Gounod, and a number of others scattered over a large model piano organ which occupied one of the panels of the drawing room. These musicians, replied Captain Nemo, are the contemporaries of Orpheus. For in the memory of the dead, all chronological differences are effaced. And I am dead, Professor, as much dead as those of your friends who are sleeping 6 feet under the earth. Captain Nemo was silent and seemed lost in a profound reverie. I contemplated him with deep interest, analyzing in silence the strange expression of his countenance. Leaning on his elbow against an angle of costly mosaic table, he no longer saw me. He had forgotten my presence. I did not disturb this reverie and continued my observation of the curiosities which enriched this drawing room. Under elegant glass cases fixed by copper rivets were classed and labeled the most precious productions of the sea which had ever been presented to the eye of a naturalist. My delight as a professor may be conceived. The diversion containing the zoophytes presented the most curious specimens of the 2 groups of polypi and echinoderms. In the first group, the tubipores were gorgones arranged like a fan, soft sponges of Syria, ices of the Moluccas, pinnatules, an admirable Virgularia of the Norwegian seas, variegated unbelliarulu, bunch of words I can't pronounce, such and such, which my master Milne Edwards has so cleverly classified, amongst which I remark some wonderful Flabellinae oculinae of the island of Bourbon, the Neptune's car of the Antilles, superb varieties of corals, in short, every species of these curious polypi, of which entire islands are formed, which will one day become continents, of the echinoderms remarkable for their coating of spines, asterae, sea stars, pantacranae, Comatulus, Astrophones, Echini, Holothuri, etc., represented individually a complete collection of this group. A somewhat nervous conchiliologist would certainly have fainted before other more numerous cases in which were classified the specimens of mollusks. It was a collection of inestimable value, which time fails me to describe minutely. Amongst these specimens I will quote from memory only the elegant royal hammerfish of the Indian Ocean, whose regular white spots stood out brightly on a red and brown ground, an imperial spondyle, bright-colored, bristling with spines, a rare specimen in the European museums. I estimated its value at not less than 1,000, is that a pound? 1,000 that doesn't look like a pound, but it might be pounds. A common hammerfish of the Sea of New Holland, which is only procured with difficulty. Exotic Bricardia of Senegal, fragile white bivalve shells, which a breath might shatter like a soap bubble. Several variations of the Aspergillium of Java, a kind of calcareous tube edged with leafy folds and much debated by amateurs. A whole series of trochai, some of a greenish yellow, found in the American seas, others a reddish brown, natives to Australian waters, others from the Gulf of Mexico, remarkable for their imbricated shell, stellari found in the southern seas, and last and rarest of all, the magnificent spur of New Zealand, and every description of delicate and fragile shells to which science has given appropriate names. Apart in separate compartments were spread out chapelets of pearls, the greatest of beauty, of which reflected the electric lights in the little sparks of fire, pink pearls torn from the Mina Marina of the Red Sea, green pearls of the haliotide iris, yellow, blue, and black pearls, the curious productions of the divers mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels of the watercourses of the north. Lastly, several specimens of inestimable value, which had been gathered from the rarest pentadines. Some of these pearls were larger than a pigeon's egg, and were worth as much and more than that which the traveller Tavernier sold to the Shah of Persia for 3 millions, and surpassed the one in the possession of the Imam of Muscat, which I believe to be unrivaled in the world. By the way, 3 million, I don't know what currency that is, but in 1870 was a lot of money. Therefore, to estimate the value of this collection was simply impossible. Captain Nemo must have expended millions in the acquirement of these various specimens, and I was thinking what source he could have drawn from to have been able to gratify his fancy for collecting, when I was interrupted by these words. "You are examining my shells, Professor. Unquestionably, they must be interesting to a naturalist, but for me they have a far greater charm, for I have collected them all with my own hand, and there is not a sea on the face of the globe which has escaped my researches. I can understand, Captain, the delight of wandering about in the midst of such riches. You are one of those who has collected their treasures themselves. No museum in Europe possesses such a collection of the produce of the ocean. But if I exhaust all my admiration upon it, I shall have none left for the vessel which carries it. I do not wish to pry into your secrets, but I must confess that this Nautilus, with the motive power which is confined in it, the contrivances which enabled it to be worked, the power agent which propels it, all excite my curiosity to the highest pitch. I see suspended on the walls of this room instruments of whose use I am ignorant. You will find these same instruments in my own room, Professor, where I shall have much pleasure in explaining their use to you. But first come and inspect the cabin which is set apart for your own use. You must see how you will be accommodated on board the Nautilus." I followed Captain Nemo, who, by one of the doors opening from each panel of the drawing room, regained the waist. He conducted me toward the bow, and there I found not a cabin, but an elegant room with a bed, dressing table, and several other pieces of excellent furniture. I could only thank my host. "Your room adjoins mine," said he, opening a door, "and mine opens into the drawing room that we have just quitted." I entered the captain's room. It had a severe, almost monkish aspect. A small iron bedstead, a table, some articles for the toilet, the whole lighted by a skylight, no comforts, the strictest necessities only. Captain Nemo pointed to a seat. "Be so good as to sit down," he said. I seated myself, and he began thus. Chapter 11, All by Electricity, and the first word is "Sir," And that is where we must begin tomorrow. So he visited the Nautilus, or he toured the Nautilus, and Captain Nemo's got a lot of cool stuff. That's what I got from that chapter. So I hope you enjoyed the chapter of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and tomorrow we will read chapter 11, and that's another story which we'll save for tomorrow. And I'm going to wait just a minute because I know the live stream lags by about a minute or two, so I'm going to just hang on tight, and we'll get to what we're doing here in just a minute. What? All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and let you go, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless you. Have a good night.